Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete and another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Good afternoon, Cougar Nation. Welcome on into Cougar Sports Saturday. Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte with you live on this Selection Sunday Eve, I guess you could say. BYU basketball's run in Kansas City comes to a close as they fall to the Houston Cougars, 74-54. We will unpack BYU's run in the Big 12 tournament and look ahead to brackets and Selection Sunday. We'll also catch up with former BYU head coach Dave Rose, who was in Kansas City, and we'll get a BYU football fix. But tough day yesterday for the Cougars in blue, Matt.
Tough day is maybe putting it mildly. I think a lot of Cougar fans, myself included, were disappointed in that showing because it felt like this team was so different from the team that played Houston that first time around down in Texas at the start of Big 12 play, and yet down 21 at half. It was a larger halftime deficit in the Big 12 tournament than it was in the first meeting between these two teams. So pretty discouraging in that regard. And, you know, it's not the end of the road, as we'll discuss for the next 3 hours. There's still hope. There's still optimism. But, man, what happened yesterday was a little deflating, Mitch.
It definitely was. And let's dive into that loss to Houston and also touch on the Iowa State game as well in the starting lineup.
The starting lineup. A look at the stories making headlines right now. It's time for the starting lineup on Cougar Sports Saturday.
So on Thursday, BYU set a Big 12 tournament record, knocking down 18 threes in that win over Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament quarterfinals. And, man, that was one of the best performances I've seen from a BYU team offensively. And I want to say a long time because we've seen some great offensive performances from BYU, but dang, that was as good as it gets. That was so efficient. The shooting was next level. Even former NBA players were going. Marcus Morris saying, if I'm a high school cat, I'm looking at BYU. This is an NBA pace. And you're thinking, this momentum, man, it's carrying over. BYU's going to take on Houston, who Houston kind of sleptwalked through the game against Colorado, the 16th seed. And I'm thinking BYU's going to be pretty competitive. Anything but the sort. BYU falls 74-54. They were down 15-0 before they could catch their breath, and it was game over from right there.
Yeah, 15-0. They trail 41-20 in that first half, and those first half stats, Mitch, are painful. 3 of 16 from 3. They only made 6 field goals in the first half. They were 6 of 30 shooting. 9 turnovers, only 3 assists. Think about that. And look, a lot of that credit needs to be given to Houston. Their defense is legit. There's nothing to take away from Houston. They looked every bit the part of a 1 seed and one of the best teams in college basketball. But if you want to compete at this level, you got to make shots. And although there was a lot of times where they never got a good look, I did think there was a number of possessions in that first half where there were good looks, and they weren't making those shots, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly why. Maybe the moment was too big. Maybe they were too hyped. Maybe they were kind of believing in the own narrative that they were a Cinderella team, and that got the best of them. But, man, it was a tough watch in that first half, and you never really felt like, even when they made a couple runs to get it to single digits, at least I never felt like BYU was ever in a position to make it interesting.
Yeah, BYU's inability to make shots was significant, and this was Kevin Young on the podium in Kansas City after the loss to the Houston Cougars.
The first game we played against him, I thought it was all their defense. Tonight, I felt like we got a lot of shots in the first half that we normally get that were good looks that didn't go down. I don't want to discredit Houston. They're an amazing team, and I learned a lot from playing against them. But I think it was a combination of our inability to make open shots. But the thing that they do really well is multiple efforts. You know, they take one thing away, and you think you got them on a swing or something like that, and they do a great job of just continuing to play, you know, with multiple efforts, and that's a credit to their coaching staff to get their team to get that done.
Well said. I felt the same way. I felt like there were good shots to be had. Look, again, the defense was stifling, and it was great, but they generated some good looks. And if you go 6 of 30, you're going to lose to Duquesne. You're going to lose to Utah Tech. You're going to lose to Houston. Like, those were season lows across the board. Field goal percentage, 3-point percentage. That was their worst shooting game of the year. And I think you can look at that in multiple ways. You can look at it and say, we're not going to shoot that bad again. That's not near our average. We'll be okay. Or you could look at that and say, if a defense is this physical and they're taking away the passing lanes, are they able to make shots? And I don't know, because it's so hard to look at the Iowa State game in this Houston. They were so polar opposite. Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy because Iowa State defensively
is a good team.
Is very – there's some similarities.
Right.
Iowa State is in that upper tier of defenses in college basketball like Houston, and they tore apart Iowa State. So when you see that performance and that efficiency and how much they've evolved in the last 2 months –
and they did it twice against Iowa State.
It wasn't just you and I. It was people nationally in college basketball saying – this could be a close game. I really felt it would be close, Matt. I'm surprised that BYU lost. And, you know, credit to BYU for, you know, staying competitive. I love the fight from Keba Keita. But I will tell you this, it's never a good sign in a game when Keba Keita is your leading scorer.
Right.
14 points. I love the effort, though, and his intensity in the second half, the back-to-back slam dunks. I love that second block he had because in that brief moment, it felt like BYU had a chance. I think they were down 13, and then Houston comes out of the timeout, and Emmanuel Sharp buries a three. And
2 threes back-to-back.
I think Fran Fraschilla said, Booj, that's educated feet. And I'm like, that's a new one. I'm going to write that down, educated feet. But, yeah, Emmanuel Sharp was brilliant once again. He joins the ranks of BYU killers. He was outstanding on January 4th against BYU last night. He had 26 points. I also got a tip of the cap to Houston on their ability to basically shut down Richie Saunders' drives to the basket. I mean, how many teams have we seen, and there's good teams in the Big 12 where Richie gets momentum, starts maybe at half court, and he just gets downhill, man, and no one's stopping him. And there's a lot of physical bigs in the Big 12. Houston always met the challenge, whether it was Arsenault, Tugler, Francis. They didn't have Juwan Roberts, the heart and soul of their team, number 13. He was out with an ankle, and they were able to shut him down. You know, Saunders only had 4 attempts inside the arc. He didn't get to the foul line hardly at all. He was 2 of 2 from the foul line. Against Iowa State, he was 8 of 8 because he was getting to the line, getting downhill, attacking the rim. Houston's really good, and that's a Final Four team. If they don't do it this year, man, when are they ever going to do it? Because it feels like how college basketball is breaking open. This should be the year for Houston to go win it all. But I think that it also shows too, Matt, that there's a bigger gap between where BYU's at and the elite of the Big 12. And I think that's a little bit discouraging because you felt like in that run of 9 games that it felt like that gap got closed quite a bit.
I think the problem for BYU in the past and the problem maybe with this team, and knock on wood, this is an outlier, and it's not a problem going forward. But you look at Houston's stats. What stands out to you? Sharp, Cryer.
Yeah.
2 of their best players. They account for 46 points. They almost score as many points themselves as BYU did in the game. And you look at BYU's best players. Richie Saunders, 10. Not his best game by any stretch of the imagination. And then you look at Trevin Knell, a starting guard. 0 of 3 from 3, 2 points. That's not good enough. Yegor Denman, one of your best players, an NBA lottery pick projection. 6 points, 5 turnovers, 2 of 9 from the field. Not going to get it done. When the expectations are there to be one of the best players, your 2 starting guards, Mitch, give you 8 points. And then you look down the line. Dallin Hall, not that impactful. 2 points, 0 of 3 from the field. You got to have great performances from your best players in these monumental games. And that did not happen against Houston. And that's something that they have got to figure out for next week. You cannot have a stat line like this where Yegor, Trevin, and Dallin give you 10 points. They are too good. They are too impactful. You need your best players to perform. Houston got that from Cryer and Sharp. BYU did not get that from their best players.
LJ Cryer, too, after the game, he went to the ESPN desk with Sean Farnham, and he even laid it out. They knew they could not let this game get in the 80s or 90s. That was going to be BYU's game. They knew that their tempo had to be set. They had to put in their tempo in this game,
and they did.
And I just like that understanding from Cryer that they knew they couldn't hang with BYU if it was up tempo. And it's unfortunate because BYU got the bracket to break their way. Arizona's in the championship game, and not to say that they would have beat Arizona a second time, but stylistically, that would have been a great matchup today. BYU and Arizona, count it as low 90s, high 80s. That would have been a fantastic game, catered to BYU style. Houston style suffocates BYU, and Kevin Young talked about things he learned coming out of that loss against the Houston Cougars.
I've been doing this for a long time, obviously not at this level, but, you always learn in the postseason, just how much things get turned up. And I told our guys, for me, I learned 2 things in that game. One is the urgency that you have to have in postseason play and the level of focus, because everything comes a little bit harder in the postseason. Every pass is more contested. Every cut gets chucked a little harder. Every blackout becomes more challenging. And so you have to understand that you have to lock in even more than you normally do. And for me, those are the 2 things that I felt like we learned from this experience.
Interesting commentary and a lot to break down from that statement alone on how things get ramped up in postseason play. Let's break that down next, Mitch. Long show to go. Great show ahead. A lot of hoops, some spring football as well. Cougar Sports Saturday, March 15th edition. Back after this. Welcome back in. We're breaking down a tough loss for BYU Hoops, though all is not lost.
That's right.
They will hear their name tomorrow. And, gosh, I want Lenardi's bracket to be right. Well, look.
We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to the bracketology later. Let's stay on point here with this BYU and Houston game. Fran Fraschilla was on the call, Mitch, and Fran is a well-respected voice within the Big 12. He's look, BYU fans know Fran Fraschilla well. He's got connections to Jimmer. He played a big role in Jimmer getting a 3-on-3, did he not?
Yes.
Okay, and he had some interesting commentary throughout the game. This was Fran Fraschilla talking about BYU's physicality. Listen to this comment and then react, Mitch.
I'm going to say one thing about BYU right now. I love them. I love the way they've improved. They're a great team to watch offensively. I don't feel comfortable that they're going to get any 50-50 balls or any 50-50 rebounds tonight. And I'm just going to tell you, they're going to listen to this tape, and if they want to go far in the NCAA tournament, they're going to have to play with much more toughness than they're showing. They're getting punked again for the second time against a team that can win it all. So if you can compete with these guys, you'll be fine in 2 weeks.
Can't argue with that commentary from Fran, and that was at the end of the first half in yesterday's BYU-Houston game, 74-54 Houston. He was right. No 50-50 balls were going BYU's way other than maybe a few for Keita. But, and I think that this commentary is interesting because a couple weeks ago, Kevin Young in a locker room setting, now it was just to the team. It wasn't at a podium in a press conference. It was with his team, so there's context there. But BYU pushed it out on their in-house media team with the cut, and he talked about, no one's punking BYU. We're going to be doing the punking. That's what surprised me about this game was that, Houston, they've had a lot of close games. It's never been, there's been some blowouts, but shorthanded Iowa State, close win. There were just many games where they did not look impressive, and you thought, man, BYU's just ripe here for the opportunity to really push Houston to the brink for a full 40 minutes and maybe spring the upset. they came out flat. And Kevin Young talked about that in the postgame last night at the podium and with Greg on the radio postgame. They were flat. And to me, that's just wild that would happen in such a big game where you play not only the Big 12 champ, but the number 2 ranked team in the country and a team that's going to be potentially a Final Four squad. And for them to come out flat and be almost shell-shocked by that physicality that you've already faced before, it's surprising. And hopefully BYU learns their lesson and says they're going to be doing the punking, to paraphrase Fran, going forward in the NCAA tournament.
I think the hard thing with this BYU team, and maybe the lesson to be learned here, is when it's not going your way offensively, you still have to row the boat. You still have to be engaged because they had some good looks to start. I thought that opening 3 by Trevin Nell, that's the same exact play and same exact shot that he made to start the game against Iowa State.
Good point.
And he missed that. And then on the following possession, Richie Saunders, mid-range jumper. It was a good look. It didn't go down, and yet it felt like after those first couple misses, then there was a turnover by Mawut Mag, and then Houston started to make some shots, and it's 0-7. And at that point, I started to feel like, wow, they're pushing a little bit. I also thought it was noteworthy, too, that there was a quick sub to get Jaeger out of the game and get Dallin in there with before. It's just, you can't let those things affect you, and unfortunately, I felt like it did, and then Houston went on that run.
How concerned are you now? 4 of the last 5 games, slow starts. Houston and Kansas City. The Utah game at home was not pretty.
Right.
Iowa State, they didn't score for the first 6 minutes. West Virginia at home was kind of a grind until they put up 51 in the second half. Any concern, you think, about these slow starts maybe becoming a trend, and maybe the win streak masks that a little bit?
Yes, I am concerned because at this point in the season, you're not going to change the starting lineup.
Yeah.
But Trevin's got to be making shots. And he's playing like he did against Iowa State. This is a dang good team. If he's not making shots, it's tough. So, yeah, I think in particular, you need Trevin and or Richie to get going early to settle things in before the second unit comes in.
Let's take a break. On the other side, we will be joined by former BYU basketball head coach Dave Rose. He was in Kansas City at the Big 12 tournament, one of the great coaches in BYU basketball history. We'll preview the NCAA tournament with Coach next here on Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for 3. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome back in. It's Cougar Sports Saturday. BYU basketball is back home. They will be awaiting their name to be called tomorrow. And that is, I think, the silver lining here is they are getting their name called. They're not on the bubble. There's no sweat.
Yes.
The only frustration could be how far you slip. But you look at that resume. Last year they were a 6. I don't know how they're any worse than a 6.
I'm with you. I feel like this is a team that deserves a 5. They should be a lock to be a 5. But it's always the history. I guess Cougar fans have just gone through a lot when it comes to seeding and whatnot, and that just leaves you wondering, like, what will happen? And I really think it'll be interesting to see what type of respect the committee gives to the Big 12 Conference. You know, we hear so much about the SEC, and they're having a historic year. Big Ten's in action right now, but the Big 12 is a dang good league. To me, BYU deserves a 5 at the low end of 6. They should not be anywhere near a 7, but we got to get out to the phone line. A man that knows the NCAA tournament very well. He coached BYU to a lot of tournaments, had a ton of success in his time at BYU, the greatest coach in BYU basketball history. Dave Rose joining us now on Cougar Sports Saturday. Coach Rose, thanks for joining us here on KSL.
Yeah, thank you. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. How was the trip to Kansas City? I know that BYU probably would have liked a different outcome yesterday, but your impressions of the Big 12 tournament?
Yeah, it's quite a a different tournament than the tournaments that I played in and competed in. The Mount West tournament in Vegas was very interesting in its setup, and obviously the WCC tournament was a little different than the Big 12 tournament. I think it's from an outsider looking in, how they treat the teams, how they treat the fans, how they treat the players. I mean, it's a great league to be in, and I think that's why BYU fans are so excited, and I know that's why the players will continue to want to come to BYU and play at a really high level because it's pretty good basketball.
Dave, what were your emotions like last night during a battle between BYU and Houston, two universities, obviously near and dear to your heart? Take us through just how you felt watching that game.
Well, I watched both teams all year, and I'm really impressed with the job that both coaches have done. Kelvin obviously has been doing it for years, and I met Kelvin Sampson 30 years ago when I was coaching junior college, and he was recruiting one of my kids. He was at Washington State, and one of my junior college guys ended up going up there and playing for him. And then obviously he went to Oklahoma and was with the Rockets. And then when they hired him at Houston, everybody, all the whole Cougar Nation Houston Cougar Nation was excited about that. So, we're close. Cheryl's close with Kelvin's wife, and so that's been interesting. He beat the heck out of me twice, once at our place and once at their place. So, but I love watching this BYU team. I think Coach Young has done a terrific job, and I really, really enjoyed the game on Thursday against Iowa State. I think that was a really competitive game and played at a really high level. I was really happy to see BYU in that game. So it's fun. It's a great time of year. It's I think what really, really excites the fan base all around and not just the individual school fan bases, but the country. They kind of jump into this thing in March, and they make it one of the best sporting events in the country.
Talk with former BYU head coach Dave Rose right now on KSL News Radio with Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. And Coach, what do you feel is the strength of Kevin Young's BYU team this year?
Well, to me, what is most impressive, besides the actual ins and outs of offensive adjustments and defensive adjustments and game plan and the prep and everything, what he's been able to do with the chemistry of this team and to play as many players. I mean, he went clear into the middle of February playing 11 players. That's really unheard of in the college world. Maybe it is a little more. Maybe some NBA teams can do that, but until our guy got hurt and our shooter, what's his name?
Catchings.
Robinson. Catchings, yeah. And so now the last 3 or 4 games we've just played 10, the rotation of 10, but that's still really unusual in the college game. And I mean, it's amazing how to have a team this good and have a team this successful in the league, and then you end up with one first team all league guy and one freshman team all guy, an honorable mention league player. That tells you how many players were used on the roster, that there weren't individual every game in and game out. It was a team effort, and you only get the two kids recognized. Some of these teams had 5, 6, 7 kids on the all-conference team. So I think that is the strength of this club, the depth of the club, and the fact that they can match up with almost any kind of team except Houston. That quickness and strength and that real toughness defensively. That they can match up with almost any team because of the variety of players and variety of teams they can put on the floor because of the amount of players that they play.
Dave, you mentioned that Houston team. not a great matchup. And look, Houston's one of the best teams in college basketball.
It's not a great matchup for very many people. Okay?
Right, yeah, right. Well said.
You take November away, and it's a terrible matchup for anybody in December, January, February, March this year.
Well,
they haven't lost many games.
So, with that being said, the 9-game winning streak is snapped. Do you think this team still has confidence despite that big loss against Houston, or was that just simply you ran into one of the great teams in the sport and you move on?
Yeah, this will be one of the easier games. You don't want to say this when you're coaching because it makes you just not seem like you're. I don't know, but anyways, when you're not coaching, you're just looking in, and the guy who's experienced it. This is an easy game to shelve, okay, and to put past you and get on to what's next. Because what's next is what you've really been playing for the entire year. You know you're in the tournament. You're not going to your meeting tomorrow with your players wondering if your name's going to be called. You're just wondering where you're going to play, where you're going to go, who your matchup is, who's in your bracket, who's next. And so I don't think you obviously they're disappointed that they didn't win the game. They didn't play better, and they're not the Big 12 champs. But they've had a great season, and these kids they'll rebound, they'll bounce back. And I'm really interested in how the tournament committee will take care of this team. If they're going to send them clear across the country to Providence, or keep them close in Denver, or where they're going to put them. And BYU is they have a little bit baggage with this tournament because we're the only team out of all the. I think maybe there's one other school in Division I that won't play on Sunday, but we're the only one that ever goes to the tournament, and they don't. I don't think they really like having to adjust for us, and so sometimes we don't get the best flip of the coin when how this works. And I think there's a real possibility they could get a 5 seed, but sometimes that's not good because they put you with the 12 and they'll take that maybe the strongest 12, or it's a 12 that I think one year we got a 12 and it was UCLA. I mean one of the best teams that ever play in the tournament. So anyways, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and hopefully the guys perform well in that first round game.
Was there ever a year, Dave, where when your teams, or even when you were an assistant with Coach Cleve, where you felt like, oh, wow, the committee gave us a higher seed than we expected? Because I feel like I know the answer, but was there ever a year that's like, wow, that's higher than we thought?
We went, I think what was 8, and went 3 times with Cleve. So we went 11 times. I would say that did not happen.
I kind of had a feeling.
What do you think this team needs to do offensively in a game like a Houston game where they're struggling to get shots going to go? What kind of wrinkle do you think they could maybe go to in the tournament to get out of that scoring drought?
Well, I think you really saw it, the adjustment made in the second half, because they really went, Coach Young brought the bigs up and the ball screen with them and rolled them to the basket, and Houston's rotation on the backside was more to stop the shooters, okay? And he didn't want to let the three-point shot. I mean, we hit 18 of them the day before. His whole game plan was to make sure that we did not get started on that three-point line and get going. And he let Cable get to the basket quite a few times and score. But I think that's a strength of ours that we can really exploit. We got 3 really good inside guys that we can play at that position to score for us. And I know that it'll be interesting on that adjustment. But the fact, I don't think you can say that, hey, if we don't make shots, we're not going to win. This team is much better than that. It's gone through. You win 9 games. He went a whole month without getting beat in the Big 12. That is something that might be really hard to be repeated again. For a long time. That's a pretty good run, and I hope that the matchups are the key. The confidence is the key, and then how your players. There's another thing that people don't really think about, but the end of the season there's a whole nother thing that jumps into that, and that sometimes it is the postseason awards. And when your players get slighted in that postseason, sometimes they get more motivated, or they come together. But also sometimes they can, be divided a little bit because of this kid got a first team and this kid got a third team or second team, and they don't, the players, there's stuff involved in the chemistry of your team that wasn't involved in the first week of February. And so there's a lot of mental games that are playing, and I think our guys they got to flush this one. Okay, the one that was yesterday, flush it, and when they come back and get ready to go on Monday and start practicing again, I think we're going to be in really good shape.
Here with former BYU coach Dave Rose for a few more moments. One of those guys that earned first team All Big 12 was Richie Saunders. I'm curious, Coach, is there anyone that Richie, when you watch him, that he reminds you of, that maybe you coached or have seen in basketball, that kind of he reminds you of when you watch him?
Well, he is really a unique player in today's world, because he's got so much to his game. I mean, he's a great shooter, but I don't think that's what you really say. That's what he is. He's a player. He reminds me a lot of Tyler Haws, but with better range than Ty. Ty was more of a kind of a 15 to 18 foot guy. He could shoot threes, but that wasn't his real strength. And Richie does shoot threes, and he's really good at it. But man, he can put the ball on the floor. He can score. He can pull up. He can shoot. He's a great free throw shooter. I mean, there's so many things that he can do on the offensive end of the floor that he's really, really improved on. He's always been really tough and stick his nose in there and defend, and he's gotten way better. In Coach Young's system, he fits really well in how they do things, but he's done a much better job of his lateral quickness and being able to keep guys in front of him. I think he's really, really improved. And I mean, if you saw, even if you probably talked to Coach Pope, and Coach Pope would tell you the truth. I mean, I don't know if Coach Pope saw Richie being, this kind of player offensively, and the impact that he would have. He has really improved and made himself into an all Big 12 player. And a lot of people say that he'll play at the next level and really have a chance to make a name for himself.
Dave, last thing for you. I think back to some of your teams that had success in March Madness, and in particular that Jimmer's junior year. You get that nice win against Florida. Jimmer had a great game, of course. You need your best players to play well. But, I'll never forget that Mike Lloyd performance in that game. Who is someone that you think could have that type of performance next week in the NCAA tournament?
Well, I think that's the beauty of this team, is that it could be 3, 4, maybe even 5 different guys, and you just look at their guard line, and all 4 of those guards that play a lot of minutes could actually have big offensive nights. If they get 2 or 3 of them that have big offensive nights, they're going to be playing, on Saturday. And so I think that the post players, have got to really be active as far as their ability to make catches, get the ball, score around the basket. But our guards and our scoring guys are going to have to, we're going to have to get 2 or 3 guys that are, I'm really, really impressed. I think we've had a couple games this year. We've had 7, maybe 8 guys in double figures offensively, and that is that's a hard thing to do. But when you're sharing the ball, it shows how unselfish you are, and we'll need a good offensive night and a really good defensive performance to get through the first round. But when we get to that next game, I think the good things can happen for this group. I really do. I believe that.
He's former BYU head coach Dave Rose. Coach, we appreciate the time, and will you be making the trip to wherever BYU goes in the NCAA tournament?
Well, I don't know. You'll have to ask my wife. She'll decide. If we go to Providence, I don't know if she'll be excited to go to Providence, but Denver's a different story.
Yeah.
We'll see where we end up. We've been to Lexington before, but it'd be fun to go out there. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's the beauty of our life, is that we can do about what we want when I don't have to go to Huntsman.
Well-deserved, Coach. We always appreciate the time catching up with you. We send our best to your wife, Cheryl, and always appreciate the time, Coach.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
That's Dave Rose here on Cougar Sports Saturday. We're taking a break. We'll talk more BYU basketball next. Maybe have a conversation on Yegor Demon and some of the conversations that we had just moments ago with Coach Rose right here on KSL.
This speech is my recital. I think it's very vital to rock around. That's right, on time. It's tricky. Here we go. It's tricky to rock around. That's right, on time.
Mitch, I got to tell you, man, feeling a lot better about that loss after talking with Dave Rose than I did on my drive up here.
Coach Rose has got a calming influence.
It's a good interview if you're just tuning in. Dave Rose, BYU legend, was on for a good 15 minutes with us just on the other, before the break. He was with us. We'll put that interview up on the podcast feed. But for him to say, because he would know, and we feel it too, like the Coach Rose era is our era of BYU hoops. Mm-hmm. Me and Mitch are in our 30s. Maybe we shouldn't date ourselves on the show, but when I really got into BYU hoops, when I would travel to Vegas and do all that fun stuff, conference tournaments, it was the Rose era. And there were many a painful loss in the conference tournament that I struggled with. And for Dave to come on and say the conference tournament losses is the easiest one to get over, because I won't deny, Mitch, I'm a little concerned, less now, but was a little concerned. Can you flush this?
Yeah.
A 9-game winning streak, you're riding high, you're the talk of the town, you're the talk of the country. Houston punks you, to use a Kevin Young term.
Mm-hmm.
Again, 2 times Houston punks you and gets you in that first half to where the second half is irrelevant. And for Coach Rose to say, it's easy to get over. You turn the page because all the work, all the effort, it's about tomorrow and going forward. It's not about the conference tournament. It's about March Madness. I'm feeling a little more optimistic that this can be flushed and you just keep stacking days.
It's interesting, too, when you look at Coach Rose. He's the last BYU head coach to win an NCAA tournament game. Before him, you got to go to Roger Reed.
Iona?
So Iona in 2012. And then
It's been 13 years.
Yes, Coach Rose won 4 games in the NCAA tournament. Pretty good, honestly, clip. There's opportunities more to be had. I'm sure he'd love to have that number higher. But then you go Roger Reed and Liddell Anderson. That's the last 3 head coaches to win NCAA tournament games at BYU. So Coach Rose, among the best in BYU history, if not the best. He was consistent as can be at BYU and did an outstanding job. And this one will be one that maybe you treat it like what they did in 2011, Jimmer's senior year, Jackson Emery. They lose to San Diego State in the conference tournament final. Heartbreak, sure, you missed out maybe on a 2 seed, but flush it, you know the big dance is waiting. And they did. And they got to the Sweet 16, and maybe it's the same thing for this group. Go to Denver, play 2 games, maybe get to the Sweet 16. I don't know. Maybe that's what the path was in 2011. I think this BYU team will respond, but it will come down to matchups, and Coach Rose knows that better than anyone.
I do think, though, there are more favorable matchups for BYU this year than in any other year.
Yeah.
Other years, it felt like half the bracket you wanted to avoid.
Do you get a little bit worried when you see the possibility of North Carolina maybe in a first 4?
No. North Carolina has
kind of
one
embrace
quad
that.
1 win. They have one quad 1 win.
Same thing with UCLA a few years ago. We thought that would be a good matchup.
Good point. All right, let's take the break on the other side. Speaking of bracketology, let's dive in.
Yes.
And predict bracketology, baby.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for 3. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Hour number 2, Cougar Sports Saturday. I think we've talked enough about the loss. I think we can put that behind us. We can flush it.
Let's flush it.
Let's flush it and look forward to tomorrow. Selection Sunday. Is Selection Sunday going to be different? Because is there going to be a Gumble revealing it? This is, off the beaten path, but who's revealing the bracket?
I believe it's Adam Zucker in the New York City.
That doesn't feel right.
Yeah, Adam Zucker, who he was back from the CSTV
we should get Gumbel's
days.
brother, even though he hasn't done sports in decades.
Yeah, I believe it's Adam Zucker.
I don't dislike Adam Zucker, but there was something about.
Oh yeah, let's go out to the upper left, the South region, presented by Coke Zero, and this is the 14th seed, the BYU Cougars.
Tell me though, tomorrow when you hear this, are you going to be running in the streets?
Oh yeah, I'm going to be running through walls.
Let's go out to the South region, the 5 seed.
This
the
is
BYU Cougars.
This is a great tournament. It's an awesome sporting event. In just the mad rush, like 4 o'clock, that bracket hits, and then it's on. Yes, it's an awesome thing. Just being in that bracket, the excitement that comes with it. It's truly what it brings in everyone, and I think it's one of those sporting events that everyone cares about. Everyone's aware that the Super Bowl. There's not many sporting events that bring in just even general society is excited for that event. NCAA tournament is awesome, and BYU is going to be in the mix once again.
Let's go over the brackets. I've got Lenardi's bracket up. Do you want to bring up the bracket matrix?
Yeah, I got that up.
So right now, BYU, they have bounced around a little bit in Lenardi's. They've settled in, and it looks like the 5. Let's see tomorrow how it shakes out. But right now, they have, when I say they, ESPN and Joe Lenardi. BYU has a 5 seed in the South region. They will be playing the 12 seed AQ. That's not determined yet, by the way. But for the Mountain West, Colorado State. What do you make? It's not a play-in. Lenardi has them straight up. BYU versus the potential winner of the Mountain West, which he thinks will be Colorado State. You like that 4-5 matchup for BYU?
I'd like that. And Colorado State would have to win today to get in. They're not going to get in as an at-large. So they've got to beat Boise State. I'm okay with that. Any chance you get to face a non-power conference team, I'm okay. And look, I understand last year was Duquesne, and it looked like on paper to be the weakest matchup that a 6 seed has ever received. And then that went out the door when LeBron turned them into America's team, and it's just like, oh boy, this turned south in a hurry. But, I tend to like a, potential non-power team matchup. Colorado State's got a pretty good player in Clifford, who's probably one of the top 15, top 20 players in college basketball. But, I think BYU matches up well with nearly anyone. I still believe that, even after the Houston game. It's just teams like Houston, Auburn, Florida, I would be frightened of for BYU.
And Auburn would be a Sweet 16 opponent, potentially, if this bracket is right.
I'm not complaining if it gets to the Sweet 16. Like, you're gonna face good teams to win through this thing, so it just is what it is. I'm okay with BYU squaring off against a Mountain West team if that's what it ended up being. But as you heard from Coach Rose, and he brought that up on his own, this committee does not like BYU's no Sunday play. I thought that was interesting because Coach Rose has lived it. He has lived that, man.
I loved your question.
Well,
did you ever get a better seed than you thought?
I mean,
no.
Well, like you run through it: 8 seed, 3 straight years, a 7, a 3, a 14 one year, a 10, and an 11. That's what Coach Rose got as the head coach.
The 3 was even a bit disrespectful.
Oh yeah, it was that senior team with Jimmer, and they had only lost 4 games,
and yet out the window that
3.
year was we look at the whole body. No, you don't. You're looking at what happened
I remember
Post-suspension.
when Coach Rose was an assistant with Coach Cleveland. It was the 2003 year, and they get a 12 seed. They're a top 25 team in the RPI back in the day, and they get a 12 seed, and they get slotted into a bracket that they can't even be in. And had BYU got to the Sweet 16 in that region, they would have switched regions with another team. It would have been insane. They were locked into a Friday-Sunday regional in the NCAA tournament had they reached the second weekend. Would have been insane. Yeah, Coach Rose, he's seen it all. And, I'm with Coach Rose where I remember those selection Sundays throughout his entire time at BYU. So I'm always hesitant to just say, yeah, BYU, lock them in, 5 seed. Remember last year, Lenardi going into the final day, BYU headed to Salt Lake, going to Salt Lake. Let's go out to Omaha where the 6th seed, the BYU Cougars, take on the Duquesne Dukes. Omaha? What?
If this bracket is mostly right, I think I want to fall down a seed line because UCLA is at the 6 in the South. The 2 seed on that side is St. John's. St. John's scare you?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of like, not, I don't want to say like Houston because they haven't done it for year after year, but physical defense. And the first time we saw BYU play a Big East team, that didn't go well.
True. Good point. Providence. But West Virginia's there, Missouri, Texas Tech. I mean, things would have to be changed a little bit to avoid maybe some conference opponents in the round of 32.
And one thing I was looking at, we could see a possible BYU Texas Tech round of 32. That could be on the table because they've only played once. They will ease their bracketing principles if they've only played once. If they played twice, that's really a non-starter. So Iowa State, not going to be a round of 32 possibility, at least if the NCAA committee is following their principles. But Texas Tech, that could be a 3 seed. BYU a 6 seed. That could be on the table potentially.
Is there anyone you want to avoid in the first round?
That's a good question.
McNeese, they're
bring on McNeese. They got the
Schroyers fighting Cowboys or whatever. They don't.
It's Will Wade now.
I know, but Schroyer's
he's
the
the AD.
Yeah.
And they've got that manager that's gone viral with the boombox and all the dancing he does. Remember Gonzaga hammered them. McNeese State's really good. They're talented. Will Wade's done a nice job, but I think BYU would take care of business against them. I guess a program that might be a little bit leery is Drake because they have been consistently in the dance year after year, 3 consecutive years. New head coach, and he's been a guy that's linked maybe to the Indiana job. Does he got one foot out the door? But that would be a team that could be scary, I guess. But I just think that BYU should show up well. I think that outside of teams like Houston, I expect BYU to perform well. And, that's not changing after playing one of the best teams in the country, the number 2 ranked team in the land. BYU, I don't care who they line up against. I'm expecting them to play at a high level, but you got to get off to a strong start. I've watched too many BYU games in the NCAA tournament, regardless of the head coach. These slow, terrible starts. Last year against Duquesne, 4 years ago against UCLA, years ago with Coach Rose and Texas A&M. Get off to a strong start, please. You start out the way you did against Iowa State, BYU is going to win any first-round game, the way they started against the Cyclones earlier this week. You play like that, you're going to win games. But if you show up and just shell-shocked and you're down 10-zip before you can blink, you're going to lose to anyone in this tournament because everyone in this bracket's going to be good.
What's your prediction then? When you think their name gets called, what's the seed line?
I think it's a 6. I think it's going to be a 6 seed, and BYU goes out to maybe Lexington, Kentucky, as a 6 seed. I could see maybe a scenario where it's as low maybe as a 7. If it gets to the whole juggling, bracketing, and rematches and Sunday play, maybe. But I think it's going to be a 6 seed, and I'll say Lexington, Kentucky. BYU has to travel out far as a team outside of the top 20 seed lines.
I'm going to go 5 in Denver.
That'd be great. BYU would fill it up, man. The cheap flights to Denver. I mean, I've seen an uptick in flights. I've noticed that. Yesterday, they took a big jump in like one-way flights to Denver. A couple days ago, you're seeing them around $80. Great. I should have just bought it. I mean, honestly, you just had the canceled fee, but now they're up to like $229 one way to Denver. It's a little bit more, but still, I think Cougar fans will buy it because they want to see their team win.
Yep.
They'll show up. You know Jimmer's showing up.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't he live out in Denver?
Except for he's in Hawaii right now, so will he be back in time? Is probably.
I would not underestimate the greatness of Jimmer Fredette. Oh, but he's also going to be involved in NCAA tournament coverage with Yahoo.
Yeah, he's got to be back. You're right.
So,
it's got to be a pre-tournament vacation.
He's got to get to Denver if BYU's there. BYU just needs the power of Jimmer at any venue they're at. How interesting would it be, and you know it would be a storyline, if they go out to Providence, the chance that it occurred?
Yep.
That would be a storyline. I honestly am hoping to avoid that just because I just want to talk ball. I want to cover BYU ball. I don't want to have, hey, Kevin Young, what do you think of being in the arena that where those chants happened in December? I mean, we're just stacking days, man. That's all. Let's just talk ball. You know that'd be a story, though.
Absolutely. Let's take a break. On the other side, back to Fran Fraschilla. He had some interesting commentary about one of BYU's guards. We'll play that and discuss next.
Welcome back in. Cougar Sports Saturday here on KSL News Radio. We're talking BYU hoops. We're waiting until Selection Sunday. We are less than 27 hours away till the bracket is revealed. Cannot wait. We're watching the Big Ten semifinal, which I will admit, Matt, it kind of pains me to always watch the SEC and Big Ten just because they're trying to mess up college sports, but I digress. Still, this time of the year is a lot of fun, and BYU is looking to bounce back after a tough loss to Houston yesterday in Kansas City in the Big 12 tournament semifinals, and one guy that struggled, and we had him on the show on Cougar Nation getting ready for the Big 12 tournament. That's Yegor Demon. 6 points for Yegor yesterday, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Hey, that's not bad. But then 5 turnovers.
That was in the first half.
5 turnovers for Yegor.
In the first half.
These physical defenses, Matt, continue to be an issue. And it's an interesting conversation because he's viewed as a highly rated NBA draft prospect. This was ESPN's Fran Fraschilla on Yegor Demon.
You know, by the way, Demon's going into the draft, and he's going to be a top 10 pick. And he's not ready, okay, but he has to come out because he's the baseball pitcher in high school that throws 99. And the Brewers are going to draft him with the 5th pick, but he's going to the minor leagues. Demon needs a lot of strength and physical maturity. He does not do well against physicality.
There is a lot to unpack there, man. And we're going to unpack it all.
And Fran, just for context, he's the voice of the Big 12, but he's also the international prospect guru. He was on ESPN's NBA draft coverage for a while as the guy that knew all the international prospects. He's one of the best in the business when it comes to international guys.
He visits teams in the Big 12.
Yep.
He's spent time around BYU. There's the obvious connection with Jimmer and three. Like when he says something like that, it's not just stick it at the wall because let's face it, we've heard a lot of that crap.
Yeah.
This year in a lot of the ESPN broadcasts is random people you've never heard of throwing crap against the wall. You know that's true.
Yes.
And it's quite frustrating to hear that. But that's not Fran. Fran
No.
is Fran, Sean Farnham. You know the greats when you hear them. Fran is one of those guys. So when he says something like this, I think you and I and a lot of people, it's interesting to hear because I trust his opinion. I think first and foremost, the part that really jumped out to me, and I hate to say he's right, but that part where he's like he has to go because the longer he stays, the more he could slip, and I think that's ultimately why he has to leave. Because what if he comes back next year with AJ and it's the same thing? Struggles with physicality, jumpers hit and miss. Yeah. And AJ has a great year. Like, then what happens? Then you got to run it back again then you're a junior, and if you don't have another so I think for Fran to say that, I hate to say he's right, but I think he's right in that if he were to come back, he could get money, but it could ultimately sabotage his NBA career. And that's what's kind of sad about the NBA draft is it's so much predicated on potential and measurements and testing and not about actual play on the court that, yeah, it feels like he does have to capitalize on this opportunity.
ESPN had a mock draft this week, and they had Yegor going number 9, and that's just one writer's opinion and view, an educated opinion, Jonathan Gavoni from ESPN.com. But, you know, I'm with you. I think Yegor's just got to go because, and I honestly think, too, that could be more valuable for BYU to have a top 10 pick.
Yes.
For Kevin
We
Young
talked about that all
offseason.
The most important thing, there were 2 things that needed to happen for Kevin Young's vision to crystallize. And it already has with neither of these happening because of AJ. But you needed to get to the tournament, check, and you need a guy to go pro.
Yep. And I think that Yegor will deliver that. And you hope, though, he can go to an environment where he will succeed. But I think Fran's right. It's going to take a lot of time. And I understand that no team in the middle of March in the dog days of the NBA season is going to play defense like Houston does.
Right.
But in the NBA playoffs, it's intense as it gets, and it's the best basketball on the planet every single night. It's still must see. I know that the NBA, like I've experienced it myself, where I'm not tuning in to as many regular season games as I once did, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. But I'm watching the playoffs.
Yep.
That's always good. That always delivers.
Yep.
And a guy like Yegor, when you're a top 10 pick, you tend to think that, you know, there's going to be a chance to be a difference maker in the playoffs. And I know the NBA views a lot based on potential, but hopes that, you know, come playoff time in year 2, year 3, you can be an impact guy. And he has to adjust to the physicality of basketball because it does get physical in the NBA playoffs. And that has been not just the Houston game, but both meetings against Houston. The Iowa State game in March in Ames was a real issue for him.
Arizona at home.
Yegor's got to improve. He's got to improve on that front with physical guard lines because he gets sped up. Providence game as well. I know that one he got hurt. I think the first possession of the game with the knee contusion. But there's too many examples where he has struggled with physical guard lines. He gets sped up, and then he becomes a turnover machine to the point where Kevin Young, and credit to Coach Young for just saying, you know what, we got to go to Hall. You know, I thought that was going to be an interesting thing this year was how much of a leash, like would there be a short leash on Yegor if he struggled on cannon catchings? Coach Young has shown more than enough willingness to say, you don't have it
doesn't
tonight.
matter.
Go to the bench.
It doesn't matter your projection.
Yeah.
It's all about the now, which I love about Kevin Young. And to that point, I think for next year's team needs Down Hall to be the point guard. And to your point, I think it's better for the program if Yegor gets selected. Though my hope for him is that he would fall to like 15, 16, 17 to get with a stable organization.
I hope he goes to the Jazz. I really do. And I know the Jazz are in this weird state right now where if they got a Cooper flag, do they tear it down even more? But I just think that environment where he's been around Danny Ainge, he's been around Ryan Smith, BYU fans would completely support him every night at the Delta Center. I think that could be a great setup. I don't want him to just go some random East Coast team. None of us watch him out here, and maybe his support group's not there for him. That's big. That's a big jump.
Not the Jazz, somewhere like San Antonio where Chris Paul's there. And
I'd love that.
That team is all about international development, and they're slow, and they grow organically. Spurs would be a great fit. They'll be middle to late. They're, I think, fighting for a play-in, so that's a home. But a lot of the teams at the top, dude, in the top 10, I don't want them to go. Like Brooklyn's been around. Provo.
Toronto.
Hey. Portland,
yeah.
Charlotte.
Chicago.
Hey, yay. Chicago. Oh, no, thank you.
Maybe Miami? Would that They've had some success with rookies in recent years.
Maybe Miami, but I mean, it is obvious to me, to Fran's point, he's not ready for the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, the right thing for his game is to come back to BYU, but that's not the right thing for his future possibilities in the NBA. And I don't know if it's the right thing for next year's team. That's the thing.
And that's always kind of been my take when I talk to fans, and like you do it too, where fans will come up to us and think, what do you think Yegor should do? Or, we talk about the team. And I've always just said, like, the NBA, just what they see in these games, I don't feel like they're seeing enough flashes of success. He's given you film too where he's really good. And when you put him with the best shooters on the planet, like, you're not going to have many NBA games where you start a game 0 of 13 as a team from 3, like they did against Utah last week.
Right.
You're not going to get that. Yegor's going to be an elite passer, and getting him the chance to pass to the outstanding shooters in the NBA, he's going to rack up the assists, man. It's going to be a thing of beauty. And also, he's a guy, too, that's just he wants to facilitate and make plays for others. That's a great skill that not many have in the lottery. So I've always just felt like, yes, the struggles that he's shown at times at BYU make you wonder, should he come back? And with the era of NIL and revenue sharing, too, he could make a lot of money at BYU. But to me, it's just you got to go to the NBA. If you're a lottery pick, you've got to go. And I think even Kevin Young would probably admit that too. I'd be curious to hear from Kevin Young what he thinks about what a player should do, because that's going to be a conversation he has to have.
And he's a great person to have it with.
Right.
Because for a lot of his NBA coaching career, he was involved in pre-draft workouts, off-season interviews with guys wanting to get to the league. He'll be a great person to have. But in moments like this, I always think of that great quote in the original Gladiator movie. I think it was Caesar or somebody telling Russell Crowe's character, there was once a dream that was Rome. You could only whisper it. Anything more than a whisper and it would vanish. That's the NBA.
Yeah.
And that's why I think when you have the NBA in your grasp, you have to take it.
I agree. Cougar Sports Saturday rolls on here on KSL. Top 5 next.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for 3. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Our producer, Nate Slack, the masterful host of the Top 5, has pink eye, so we told him to stay away. So he will not be hosting any competitive list of the Top 5 today. But that's not going to stop us on the eve of Selection Sunday to put together some sort of Top 5 list. And we might need your help. 57500. We're looking for the 5 best NCAA moments in the history of BYU basketball. Let's do it now.
The Cougar Sports Saturday Top 5. Top 5. Mitch and Matt clash in a weekly battle of BYU sports knowledge. Here's the Top 5.
No battle this week, as I mentioned. But, Mitch, I'm going to throw moments at you, and you're going to slot them 1 to 5, okay?
All right.
And we're open to text as well, 57500, in case there are moments, maybe more so in the 80s and 90s, that we could be forgetting. I think we've got the 2000s locked up. But first moment, the comeback against Iona. That was a play-in situation. BYU was down by, what was it, 23?
Gosh, what was that?
I know it was 20-something.
I thought it was, for some reason, I'm thinking
Was it 25? 26?
25.
Down 25, Mitch. 1 through 5, where would you put that as the 5 best BYU basketball moments in their history?
I'm going to say 4 because you still dug yourself a hole of 25 points against Iona. And I remember that Iona team, they had Scotty Machado, and he looked like he was ready to be the player of the year in college basketball, how he was lighting up BYU. But that was a awesome, historic comeback. I think President Obama was at that game.
I think you're right.
He was at the first game. It was in Dayton. It was in the first four. And I think Obama was there. I can't remember if he was at the BYU game. He might have left. He just saw the 25-point lead. He's like, I'm out, folks. I'm leaving. But yeah, I'm going to say 4. What about you?
I'd probably put it a spot higher, 3.
Okay.
Everything you said is right. It's a play-in game. It's Iona. A win against Iona in a play-in game is not really noteworthy, but it was a historical comeback. And that was also a BYU team that I do feel like they overachieved. There weren't any star players that come to mind. Like Noah Hartsock was a part of that team. Good role player, but you would never draft Noah as one of the best players in the history of BYU basketball.
That was also, too, one of the early years of the first four. I think it was the second season. I think the first year was 2011. But I remember getting an email like 30 minutes before Selection Sunday, and I was on a mailing list for some media, and it said, the team you cover could be going to Dayton. And I'm thinking, at this time I'd never covered an NCAA tournament, so I just thought maybe this is some standard procedure because it's BYU. I don't know. But I thought that was the weirdest thing. And then, sure enough, BYU lands in Dayton. And the weirdest thing, I believe BYU is the lowest seeded first four team ever in the first four. They were a 14th seed. And then 2 days later, they went to Louisville and played Marquette and Jay Crowder and lost that game to Marquette. But yeah, that BYU team, though, was pretty solid. Noah Hartsock, Brandon Davies. I remember Brock Zylstra had a big performance. And then DeMarcus Harrison came off the bench, I think, and had, was it 15 points or something?
Yep.
The one-year wonder of DeMarcus Harrison. Remember, we thought that was the peak of BYU basketball recruiting. Oh, how the times have changed,
Seriously,
buddy.
They really have.
But
Wow.
but yeah, I'll say 4.
Let me throw in a couple of random quick hitters at you, and you can tell me if they even register.
Okay.
2020, I know they don't go, but would have been a high seed and a high Cinderella pick. Just the potential of 2020.
Yeah. Well, and also I think you and I were texting about this, I think. Were you, like me, during COVID, watching the Reddit college basketball, college hoops 2K8 simulation of BYU?
Yes.
Getting to the Final Four, I'm like, oh, man, this would have been BYU, man.
So I've given this a lot of thought over the years, and this has come up a lot of late. This team, are they as good as 2020? Could they make a run? You know what often gets forgotten about that 2020 team and why I don't think they make a run? Barcelo broke his wrist at the end of that year.
And lost to St. Mary's.
And they lost to they weren't the same team that beat Gonzaga. When Barcelo went down with that injury, and that's why I was so freaked out about this Big 12 tournament, because if someone like Barcelo was not a key player on that team, but he was a great role player. And if they would have lost Keita to an ankle injury or some good high-level role player, it could have changed the prospects of this year's team. So I think we've overlooked that sometimes when thinking about that 2020 team. Is Barcelo played in that St. Mary's game, but he was a shell of
That's
himself.
right, because he got injured in the Pepperdine game.
Yes.
He hurt his wrist, and that was, I think, BYU sold out Firestone Fieldhouse, like BYU fans.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure it was 95% Cougar fans. And then they go to Vegas, and I remember Matt over here said, Mitch, are we going to get out of Vegas alive? I go, what are you talking about? Well, Mitch, there's this thing called the coronavirus, and it's getting pretty intense. And I said, Matt, stop. We're going to be fine. Well, yeah, about that. Don't turn to me for medical advice. That's like I remember following it in the news, and I remember Jeff Kaplan asked me, Mitch, will the NCAA tournament be canceled? I said, Jeff, come on. That's not happening. They're not canceling the NCAA tournament. No way.
Then the next night, Rudy Gobert was touching everyone's microphones, and then the world shut down.
Yeah, I remember the WCC commish got a statement, and we're gonna hit business as usual here at the WCC tournament. We're gonna be fine. moving on. They got their tournament in. No one else in the power conferences did because that was the one, I guess, benefit to playing early in the early week of conference tournaments. But, yeah, that 2020 season I would not – because there was no tournament and –
Doesn't register.
Yeah,
then.
it doesn't
Okay.
register.
Fair. All right. How about Jimmer's junior season win against the Florida Gators in overtime?
Yes, that's number, I'd say 3. That's up there. That was a great game. Awesome performance. You brought it up with Coach Rose. Mike Lloyd was clutch in that game. I think that was, they played obviously against K-State in the second round, but I think that was the end of Mike Lloyd. I believe he got suspended the following year, and we never saw him in a BYU uniform again. But I remember Jimmer was laying on the ground, waving at the camera, and that became an iconic moment in March Madness. That was an awesome game. Yes, put that at number 3. What about for you?
Yeah.
That was double overtime, first NCAA tournament win since 93.
I'll put it at 4, right behind the Iona game.
Okay.
Great win, but the Iona one had some history behind it.
Okay.
How about sticking with Jimmer? What about the win against what was that team in the round of 64? His senior year, it was
Wofford. The Terriers.
What, does that register?
No. I think it was just Jimmer had some big shots.
Jimmer versus Gonzaga, round of 32.
Yes, I put that at number 2. That was awesome because no one was picking BYU. Davies was out. I remember Dick Vitale going into the games like, Mark Few, baby, the Zags advance. And, just no one was picking BYU. I'm like, what are we doing here? I know Davies isn't there, but at that time, Gonzaga was still Cinderella-like. They were not the powerhouse like that BYU experienced in the WCC. And I was like, no way. BYU's going to beat the Zags. And then that iconic picture of Jimmer rising up in Denver. Logan Magnuson's like looking up. He's on the Sports Illustrated cover. If I was Logan Magnuson, I'm pulling that out every day of my life. Hey, did you know I was on the cover of Sports Illustrated? Yes, when print was a thing. Yeah, that's up there. That was a big-time win. I think Gonzaga had Robert Sacre, former Laker himself.
Yes.
Yeah. And
did they have Roni Turioff, or is he gone by then?
I think he was gone. I'm convinced, too, that win by BYU put Gonzaga into overdrive because they're like, we're not letting these dudes, because it was known BYU was going to the WCC. And I think that Gonzaga looked at themselves in the mirror and were like, we got to take this to a higher level. We're not letting BYU come in and take us off our perch in the WCC. I know Gonzaga just themselves and the greatness of Mark Few got them to great heights, but I do believe the fear of BYU took them to a higher level. I believe that.
Danny Ainge, coast to coast.
Number 1, man.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's NCAA tournament iconic. Like, you'll see commercials in March Madness of that play still to this day. I think it was a couple years ago. AT&T had a commercial running on Danny Ainge going coast to coast against the Irish. Kelly Tripucka, right? I mean, that's iconic. That is the great moment in BYU history, and it got BYU to the Elite Eight. It's the only time they've done that. So, and it was Ainge, an iconic player in BYU history. Amazing game. Digger Phelps, I think, would still bring it up today with his highlighter if he was still on TV. Awesome performance. I've rewatched that game on demand, many times, and it's amazing to see how much the tournament has changed in those years. Those were the early years of the 64-team field. But yeah, that's got to be number 1. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I think the top 2 are easy to pick. Jimmer versus Gonzaga, number 2.
Yes.
Danny Ainge, coast to coast, number 1.
Yep.
I'm curious if you think the Jimmer loss to Florida his senior year Sweet 16 game belongs in here.
No. I mean, it was awesome that they were in the Sweet 16, but I thought that they underperformed, and that's where the what if game comes into play.
I hate that what if game.
I hate it so much.
Because they could have went to the Final Four.
Because I'm convinced they beat Florida, and then they advance and they play Butler, and then it's VCU. I've ran the simulation in my head many times, and then what was it? UConn played Butler 49-46 in the title.
Yep.
Jimmer would have had 49 himself. He could have beat UConn himself.
That's a good point.
Like, are you kidding me? BYU would have won it that year. So yeah, for that reason, no, I do not put that in the top 5. I also did not like.
So no losses in the top 5. There's some A&M losses.
That the A&M ones just were so frustrating.
UCLA was frustrating
too. Those A&M years, the one in Anaheim really bothered me because I felt like Jimmer got brought into the game too late. I think they were down, 18-2?
Yeah.
And then Jimmer comes in, and then it's a ball game. It was like too little, too late. They got a kill shot right at the beginning. I just thought, oh, here we go. BYU struggling in March Madness, and then getting that rematch against A&M. I thought that was a joke to do that to BYU again, and they go cross country to do it. I think that was a 10 a.m. tip, and you go, oh, it's noon, and they're already done. Yeah, I don't put that. I would say.
So what's number 5 then?
Number 5, it just highlights that there's not many to pull from, Matt.
I would personally put that Jimmer performance against Florida in the Sweet 16 is number 5, just because, agreed, everything you said is right. They underperformed. Jimmer did not shoot well, but there were still some moments. That deep three, he's got the bandage on his chin. Like, BYU was right there and just didn't get across the finish line, but there were some memorable shots in that game that still, I think, get played from time to time. Jimmer shooting it from way deep and Reggie Miller getting crazy.
How about 1991, BYU takes down Virginia, and crazy fact here, that's the last time BYU took down a single-digit seed.
That's it. I think that's it.
That was in the Huntsman Center. I think Virginia had John Crotty, Utah Jazz great himself. BYU knocking down Virginia 61-48, and then in the round of 32, they played Arizona, who had was that Sean Elliott? They had Brian Williams, who later became Bison Dele.
Steve Kerr on that team?
No, I think that was after Steve Kerr. But, yeah, I got to say Virginia. There's been so much heartbreak, though. BYU lost at the Horn to Eldon Campbell and Clemson. They had a win over Charlotte in overtime. They lost to New Orleans. They beat UAB in 84. Then they got hammered by Kentucky. Just been a lot of heartbreak over the years. You know what? How about this? Number 5. This one. Okay. How can we miss this? Round of 32, they knocked out UCLA to then play Notre Dame.
Okay.
That's got to be at number 5.
I think you're right.
Beating UCLA when UCLA still had a lot of clout. They weren't the incredible run of the 60s and 70s, but BYU taking down UCLA 78-55, and it was in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a place BYU could land on this year's bracket potentially. So maybe BYU could be heading back to Providence. That's got to be number 5 to me.
I think
taking
you're
down
right.
UCLA.
I like that. All right, there you go. Top 5 NCAA tournament moments. There is a wide open window here for this year to get into the top 5.
Well, and isn't that great for Kevin Young? He inherits a BYU basketball program that's got a lot of history, but untapped potential. Kevin Young, if that man gets to a Sweet 16 in year 1, build a statue. I'm telling you, because this program has had just so limited, the limited success in this dance. If he comes in year 1 and has success, man, that is just so against the norm of BYU basketball. You can't even comprehend it. That's what's, I think, so exciting about Kevin Young's potential at BYU is that, yeah, tons of history, but he's still got so much to gain and become a legendary coach in BYU basketball history.
Let's take a break. On the other side, we got to get to the potato connection to BYU basketball. We'll discuss that next. Sam Farnsworth stopped by from KSL 5 TV, and Sam, we were just charting out the top 5 moments of BYU basketball. We had Jimmer in Denver laying it on Gonzaga. You were there for that, right? Did you work? You worked in market at that time?
Yeah, I was working in Colorado at the time, so I covered that NCAA tournament run, and of course, everyone was, infatuated with Jimmer Mania at the time. It was all over the country, and it was definitely a big deal in Colorado too. And I saw BYU play at the Air Force Academy during that season earlier that year.
Clune.
Yeah, Clune Arena. That place was probably more than half full of BYU fans, and but yeah, the NCAA tournament at Pepsi Center, what do they call it now, Ball Arena in Denver. That was something else. That was the first time I'm really watching Jimmer from a perspective of I didn't have to hold a camera or anything like that. I could just sit there and I saw him against Wofford. But that second game against Gonzaga, I didn't have any deadlines. We didn't have a show. We were a CBS station, so we just had games on, right? So I was just sitting there, just watching him play. And you guys had experienced a full season plus of Jimmer Mania. That was my first up-close view of what Jimmer Fredette was capable of doing at the college level. And me and my coworkers were sitting there just watching with our mouths just dropped, like those three-pointers. You remember that cover photo on Sports Illustrated?
Yes.
Before the game, I saw the guys setting up that camera. There was like right underneath this table where we were sitting. He's like messing around under there, putting a camera, like a fixed camera under a table. I'm like, what is he doing? And then I saw that Sports Illustrated cover. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the camera. That was an amazing shot.
That's a great story.
Anyway, the foresight that they had, right, to have cameras in every single possible location to capture those shots.
Wow.
But yeah, that game was ridiculous.
Do you think this year's team can have a Jimmer-like run again?
Man, they're good, right? They're deep.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've known a BYU basketball team this deep before. You guys
Agreed.
have covered, where Kevin Young's even talking about in the Big 12 tournament the other day how normally they rotate 11, but because of Catching's injury, they're just rotating 10 right now. And you're just like, wait, you're still rotating 10 players. That's amazing. That's
would be 11 if they didn't have an injury.
Right. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, yes, they could potentially have one of those runs. I don't think Richie Saunders is going to be doing the 30-plus every game. But the fact that you've got 2 or 3 guys that if they get hot could pop off for 15 to 20 points, and you don't expect that, I think that's a big deal for BYU. And roles like that, if players like that step up and have those kind of performances at the NCAA tournament level, BYU's going to be hard out. I think so, at least for the first weekend.
Let me ask you this too, Sam. Tonight, local ties, and I think Cougar fans are interested because Utah Valley down the road, former BYU guy Tanner Toolson. UVU takes on Grand Canyon. We've also got Utah State. They lost last night, but projected still in the field. I think they should comfortably be in. Do we see 3 local teams in the NCAA tournament, you think, this year?
Man, Grand Canyon's going to be tough. But this is amazing for Utah Valley, right? I mean, I went to school there for a couple of years, and to think that they've gone from junior college to finally – I mean, this is what me and a couple of my buddies and roommates and college mates would talk about, like when they were making that transition to D1. Holy cow, how amazing would it be if Utah Valley was in the NCAA tournament someday? And here we are, 1 win away from that potentially happening. They've never been to a conference championship game before. That would be amazing. I think that'd be really cool, and to have BYU and Utah State and Utah Valley, and someday, I mean, to think that, Weber's had these runs before, SUU's sniffed the tournament before, Utah's, I mean, I think they're doing the right stuff to get back there someday.
No question.
To think that this state, any given year, you could have 4 or 5 teams in the NCAA tournament, that'd be bonkers.
We're going to have a basketball state again, I think, in college basketball here locally.
It would be fun. A lot of fun.
All right, Sam, thanks for stopping by. Got to take a break.
I hijacked the show. Thanks for letting me come in.
Anytime you want to stop by, you're always welcome, Sam. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday. It's complete. Touchdown! Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for 3. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome on in, Cougar Sports Saturday, hour number 3. Let's go now to conversation I had with BYU football offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick. Caught up with him earlier this week at practice. This is BYU OC Aaron Roderick. Welcome back into KSL News Radio here with BYU offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick. And Coach, how do you feel about where the offense has made the biggest progress here in spring ball, getting close to the midway point now?
Well, the most progress we've made, I would say, is just some of our younger players learning our scheme, just development there, fundamentals and technique, and just knowing what to do. Those young guys are the guys that you're going to need when you get 5, 6, 7 games into the season and you get an injury, and one of those guys has to step up at whatever position. Everybody knows last year we started 3 different centers. We had seemed like a different offensive lineup almost every game. And credit to Coach Woods and to those kids, those players, man. Those guys had put in the work and they were ready to play. And so that's what we're trying to get out of spring ball, is just achieve depth at every position and have guys that can, whether they're starters or not, be ready to play in Big 12 games when they're needed.
You bring up that offensive line. Is there anyone in that O-line that is trying to maybe take fill the shoes of Connor Payne in terms of off the field and on the field as far as a leader goes along that offensive front?
Yeah, I mean, we have some good leadership there. Isaiah Jada is doing a really good job at left tackle, and he's a guy that's not afraid to speak up. He's a really charismatic kid. He's somebody that I think everybody respects a lot. He started 12 games at Colorado, and then last year he came in and agreed to redshirt and just worked hard all year, ready to play. And then when we needed him at the end of the season, he stepped up and played very well in the Utah game and the next week. And I expect him to be a really good player and a good leader. Bruce Mitchell's playing back at center. He did a great job last year at center, and he's not as vocal as Connor, but he's just lead by example guy. And then we just have a bunch of guys come back. Austin Leosa did a nice job for us last year, and he's out here playing really well. So that O-line group I'm really proud of those guys, and we're building some depth there.
How proud are you of the steps forward that the offense as a whole took last year, and how do you build on it in 2025 with this third year in the Big 12 now?
Well, we did make a massive improvement. I appreciate you pointing that out. We were 31.3 points a game last year was good, and we want to be better than that. We're not satisfied by any means, but it was a huge improvement. I think we were one of the top 10 most improved offenses in the country in scoring, and we were, I think, the second most improved offensive team in the country in the run game. And then I thought we did a lot of good things. The next step for us, though, is to take that next step. We need to score a few more points this year, and it starts with taking good care of the football and throwing more completions. I mean, we want to up our completion percentage without being less explosive. We're a team that likes to throw the ball down the field, so our completion percentage sometimes suffers a little bit by we throw it farther than most teams, but we want to throw more completions and take a little bit better care of the football and just sort of take that next step at all positions. If I keep telling the team, if everybody just improves a little bit, then the collective improvement is huge. And so there's no magic bullet, there's no magic formula. It's just everybody getting a little bit better, and so that's what we're striving for.
You've been pretty transparent this during the winter and here in spring that you want to see, Jake improve that maybe touchdown to INT ratio. Can you see progress in spring for a veteran like Jake that's been in actual games now, or do you feel like even this third spring for him at BYU you can still see progress from him in these 15 practices?
Absolutely, I'm seeing progress every day, and in my experience in coaching, usually that third year is the big year for quarterbacks. That's whether it's Zach Wilson's third year in the program, Jaron Hall, he was it was actually his fourth year in the program, but his second year as a starter, but it was his third year since he had started some games. He started some games that year when Zach got injured. The next year he was a full-time starter, and then the third year he was lights out and gets drafted. And you can go back through BYU history, man. The guys that are second and third year starters are usually the ones that play really great. And so that's what I expect from Jake, is just keep getting better every day. And I think we've set some very achievable goals. Nothing outrageous. We want to up our completion percentage. We want to throw fewer interceptions and more touchdowns. I mean, we have sort of a step-by-step process of how we're trying to achieve that with the way we implement the offense each day in practice, and try to have some measurable goals each day for him that we can review the film the next day and say, okay, we did better today in the red zone, and then the next day it might be about third downs. Okay, how do we do today on third downs? Those situational things, we're just looking for incremental improvement each day.
Last couple things here for Coach Roderick. At the Alamo Bowl, Jake noted to me that he says you probably won't find a better quarterback offensive coordinator relationship than between me and Coach Roderick. I would like to hear your thoughts on your relationship that you formed with Jake over these years, because I know you had identified him from the JC ranks and thought he'd be a big-time player, and just that relationship that you guys have developed over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way about him, and I from the beginning when I first met him, I believed in him, and I think that that's been sort of there's I'm not I've my flaws. Everybody has their flaws, but I think whether it was Zach Wilson or Jaron Hall or Keaton Slovis or Jake, the one thing I want those guys to know when they take the field is that I believe in them, and that I don't flinch. If something goes wrong, you've probably seen that I'm not a very emotional guy. I don't have a lot of big reaction to things, good or bad. I try to be the same guy every day for those guys, and I think that consistency is what allows us to have a great relationship.
And then last thing, just maybe for the back half of spring ball, just some objectives that you and the staff are looking to achieve in these remaining practices.
Well, the first thing is just to keep building our depth. I mean, we need. It's a long season, and you never know how many guys you're going to need at any position. So we're trying to get everybody better just each day, and it's just basic things. Getting lined up, knowing the play call, executing your assignment with the right fundamentals and technique. That's number one. And then secondly, just the things I've mentioned. We want to be a little bit better in the red zone. We need to be a little bit better on third down. And we feel like if we do those things, take better care of the football, in the red zone and do better on third down, that's going to lead to more points. It's pretty simple. I mean, if you're converting a couple more third downs a game, that's 3 more downs you get, another more chances to throw the ball down the field or get yourself in the red zone, and then we got to finish those red zone drives with touchdowns. So that's where we're looking to improve, and we'll keep working at it.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you.
Good stuff, Mitch, with the OC, Aaron Roderick, and he spoke earlier today along with Jay Hill and Jake Retzloff, which there's some good commentary, which we'll get to later on. But I like Aaron Roderick's approach to this spring football. I think he's setting the right goals. I think he is, and I've always appreciated too, Aaron's just candor, and willingness to give you information.
He said in that interview, I haven't always been the best. I admit that. Because let's call it what it is. Aaron Roderick.
The Keaton year, not his best.
Right. Aaron Roderick has been sometimes a point of contention among Cougar fans, where some want him fired. Others feel like he's done great. It's and that's to be expected with any BYU offensive coordinator. There has not been one BYU OC.
Even Norm Chow, who went on to run the USC offense in their heyday, also got ran out of town.
Yeah, I mean, everyone that's an OC at BYU goes through the ringer.
For sure.
It's
a hard job.
And I think that Roderick's approach and understanding, like, hey, I've had some slip-ups, but he does a pretty good job of self-evaluating, but he's got to, level it up. And I think that's going to be the challenge in front of this group this year, is to go from 31 points a game to around 35, 36, 37 points. Can they get to that threshold? Because if they do that, Matt, I think they can win. They can be, at least in that final week again, in the mix to go to the Big 12 championship, and I think be in that game and have a chance to be 60 minutes away from potentially winning.
I like that he has set tangible goals that I think are attainable for his quarterback, because to me, I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say it until the season starts probably. The success of this team depends on Jake Retzloff.
Definitely.
I believe the defense will be top 5 good again. I believe there's enough offensive returning talent. I believe the running game will be there. I believe the offensive line will come together. I'm not ready to say I believe that Jake is going to take the jump. I'm optimistic that he can. He's got the talent to do so. He's got the support to do so. I love that the coaching staff is intact. TJ Woods is back for another year. Everything is there to go to the Big 12 title game. It's all there. To me, it just depends on Jake. And I love that Aaron Roderick said, Jake, we need 70% completion. We need 30 touchdowns. We need single-digit INTs. If he gets to those numbers, they're going to score 35 a game, and they're going to go to Dallas.
Well, think of the last 2 guys that were in year 3, as you heard from Roderick. Zach Wilson, year 3, that's what his numbers were. the efficiency. And I know that 2020 year was.
But his numbers were historically great.
He took advantage like they were bad opponents.
Yep.
Jaron Hall, third year in the program, 2019, 2020. Well,
2021, third year, but he's a starter. They have a great year. He's high 60%.
2022, even in that 8-5 year, he's not coughing up the football.
No,
he's taking care of the rock.
That was. There were a lot of things at work, but it wasn't Jaron Hall.
Yeah, it was the defense. Let's call it what it is. I mean, the defense prevented Jaron Hall from having a big senior year, and it's really kind of a shame because if he had a Jay Hill defense that year, I think that we're talking about a different memory of Jaron Hall's senior season. But that's beside the point. But really, what it shows though is that there is a track record under Roderick that year 3 of these QBs, they take a massive jump, not only in yardage, but a pass completion rate and taking care of the football. And if Jake does that, BYU's going to be in a great spot because I will say he's got to stay healthy.
Yes.
Behind him, I haven't seen enough yet that says the operation continues at a high level like we're seeing with BYU basketball. Oh, Yegor doesn't have it. Dallin Hall comes in and continues to operate at a high level. I'm not seeing that yet anywhere close with BYU's backup QBs. I do think that McKay Hillstead, to me, would be the pick for that number 2.
I think he will eventually be the backup quarterback. And the reason I say that is Aaron Roderick loves a dual-threat quarterback, and McKay Hillstead, who he noted today when asked a question about track and field and how that translates to football, he brought up McKay and his background in track and field. Yep. So I think just because of that, McKay will ultimately, I think, rise to the top there as the backup quarterback. But to your point, whether it's Bourget or McKay Hillstead, not a lot of production at this level that you can lean on to feel confident that they can get it done. That doesn't mean they can't. Jake didn't have a lot of Division I production, and then look at the year he had as a first-time starter for BYU last year. So it can be done. But to your point, there's a lot of question marks in that quarterback room, including Jake still, and that's got to be shored up if you want to feel good about making a run this fall and going to a Big 12 championship game.
In the words of Lavelle Edwards for so many years, this team's got a chance to be a pretty good football team.
They do.
That's to me, I think the biggest thing that really stands out in spring is that they've got the pieces.
They've got the pieces. However, I did like that A-Rod is, he's in great postseason form right now with the media. I love everything he's giving us.
Yeah.
And I love that he pointed this out because it's true. Great season last year, but it could have been a mediocre season because there were a lot of close games that went our way. Now, they won those games, and credit to them for winning them, but let's not act like 9 of the 11 wins, we just blew the doors off people. So,
and the Big 12, it's the crazy league.
Yep.
Hopefully for this league, BYU, Arizona State, they sustain it and continue on and be some top dogs, and you start to establish yourself nationally as the teams you look at and say, yep, it's the Big 12, it's BYU, it's ASU. But we know this league through 2 years, it's pretty crazy. And teams that you think are going to be good, they end up being bust. Last year's schedule at this time, you thought BYU was going to play the top 5 teams. It was the bottom 5 teams when it was all said and done. So it is a fine margin for error in the Big 12 in football, and they've got to continue to get better and taking care of the football, and Jake getting better, to your point, is going to be the biggest key of them all, because if he becomes a superstar and becomes one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, and I would say, too, if we're talking Big 12 championship, he's got to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football, in the nation, to get to that level. Because Sam Leavitt last year, he was one of the best quarterbacks in college football.
Good point.
That's what it takes to win the Big 12. You got to be one of the best in the nation. That's what Jake's got to become.
Let's take a break. More football talk on the other side. It's Cougar Sports Saturday right here on the legacy home of the Cougs, KSL News Radio. Welcome back in. Cougar Sports Saturday. What'd you make of Andy Reid and Taysom Hill being at the Big 12 tournament? Pretty cool, huh?
I thought that was cool. Taysom Hill, is he a diehard Cougar Hoops fan?
I know. He was at the Utah game.
We got to find out. Does he have some connection to Kevin Young by chance? He was sitting in the Hollywood seats next to the bench.
You're right. We got to find out.
Craig Cusick was sitting there too.
Cusick makes sense.
Yeah.
He's very involved with BYU basketball, but Hill.
Hey, it's awesome. Taysom Hill, that's what I love about BYU's greats. They're still fans.
Yep.
I just think that always means something more when the best players that you've had, whatever sport it is, they still care about their alma mater. There's so many guys that go through college sports where they graduate and, they do their thing and it's a means to an end and they move on. But they don't care about the school. Look, I've seen that also with some BYU guys, maybe guys that you never remember or whatever, and they'll say, hey, you still following the team? No, I haven't watched football in 10 years. Like, what?
Luke Staley's a bit that way, right?
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think he follows BYU very closely.
Yeah, he did admit that, it's hard to watch, because he went through a lot and he kind of pulled himself away. He does have kids playing sports now, or football, but it's just cool when you see Taysom. He's a great BYU ambassador. I mean, Taysom Hill's one of those people that I would expect one day to somehow be referenced in a general conference story. Like, that's just Taysom Hill. He's just a good guy, and his story is impressive, and he's gone through so much adversity in his career. That was awesome to see Taysom Hill supporting the Cougs out in Kansas City.
I'm surprised he hasn't been cut yet, though.
It's true.
I thought he would get cut.
So did I.
Him and Kellen Moore, kind of an interesting combination there.
I like it. I think I'd be intrigued. I mean, I'm just always waiting for him to get cut so then Sean Payton picks him up in Denver.
Which, that'd be a nice place to be. That's a trendy team on the up.
Even though I do feel like Payton did him wrong.
He
just rolled with him.
I'll never understand why they went with Jameis, because as history's proven out, Jameis is what he is.
Yeah.
Just see what Taysom is. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But Jameis was never going to become a number 1 overall draft pick like he was taken. Was he? I think it was the first pick in the draft, right?
First overall to the Bucs.
He was never going to live up to that. So why did they roll with him?
It's amazing, too, that when you think Taysom's going to be 35 when football
How much more do you think he has left, especially after this injury?
That's what I'm wondering. Does he have much left? I wouldn't bet against him. I've learned that. Taysom Hill, do not bet against that man when you doubt him. He will prove you wrong. He's the type of guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow plays till he's 40. Like, that sounds crazy with the way that he plays.
So many injuries, though. Like, do you just call it a career?
Those paychecks are pretty nice, though, I bet.
Yeah, $15 million a year or whatever it is.
The life of Taysom, Hollywood seats, the Swiss Army knife.
Speaking of guys who might be done, not to go negative here, but have we seen the last of Jamal Williams in the NFL? He was a casualty of the Saints. You think it's over for him?
I think so. Maybe it's a deal where you get into a training camp, someone goes down with some injuries. Remember a couple years back, the Ravens had, I think it was 3 guys that go down with injuries at running back, and you pull from the free agency pool, maybe something like that. But I think it's going to take some time. It's not going to be he's picked up here in the short term, because you still got the draft, you got free agency to play out, OTAs. I would expect it's going to take some time for Jamal to stick on a team. But look, the last time he played was Kalani's first year. Kalani's on year 10. He's had a nice NFL career.
That's true. Good point.
And he's almost gone a decade. So in a league where you're lucky to get 3 years, Jamal did a nice job if it is the end. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's got one more chance to get on a team, maybe. But it's going to be later in the summer and closer to the season, I would expect.
Speaking of guys with last chances, Zach Wilson to Miami. I think he picked a great potential last destination. You can only bounce around so long. I think this is a good chance to where Tua, his injury issues are well documented. If Zach can somehow win that backup job, there's a chance to play and maybe extend the career. Because all you need is a 3-game sample of competency, and then maybe you can become Sam Darnold again. You can become Geno Smith again. But if you don't have that opportunity, and one thing I do think that is helping Zach is that when he got kicked out of town for Aaron Rodgers, it was all Zach's fault. But now that Aaron Rodgers got dumped by the Jets, I think that might have bought him another opportunity, because the Jets are truly a dump.
Yeah.
So that's benefited him. But this is, I think it was wise of him to take that Dolphins job knowing that, I mean, Tyler Huntley played a game last year for the Dolphins. Like, they went through a lot of quarterbacks since Tua's been the starter. There might be a opportunity there in Miami.
It's a great spot, and when you look at their roster, it's only him and Tua as the quarterbacks right now.
Wow.
That's it. So, and we know Tua's injury history.
They'll draft someone.
For sure. And it does also show, too, that when you are a high draft pick, you get a lot of chances. And when you're a quarterback and you've had some games, not many for Zach's case, but a few games and a few moments where you've looked pretty good at times, there's always a team that might think we could get something out of him. We could be the team that turns him around. So I'm hoping for the best for Zach. And I do believe that he's one of those guys, too, though, that even if he doesn't play in a game, you're going to be impressed with the work ethic, the way that he goes about approaching the game. And I think that's honestly what's kept him probably in the league. You know, Sean Payton raved about him in training camp last year for Denver, in large part because of the way the guy handled his business. And that was kind of questioned early on because of that toxic environment with the Jets where I think it was that game, what was it, against Pittsburgh or maybe New England.
It's New England.
Where he's like, he didn't really take.
You only scored like 3 points. You didn't move the ball. Is this your fault?
Yeah,
No.
and it was kind of a bait and switch question, but I think Zach's a pro, and he's going to carry his business in a professional way, and we'll see if he gets a chance to maybe play in some games and start some games for Miami this season.
Let's take a break. News, traffic, and weather coming your way on the other side. We'll keep talking some BYU football.
It's Cougar Sports Saturday.
It's complete. Another touchdown!
Cougar Sports Saturday. A presentation of KSL Sports.
Left wing for three. He got it again!
BYU Sports Talk by Cougar fans for Cougar fans. Here are your hosts, Mitch Harper and Matt Baiamonte. On Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM and 1160 AM.
Welcome on in to Cougar Sports Saturday. We're having a great show. Having a really good time. These are fun times watching conference tournaments. Although I will say now that BYU's out, I'm ready for the conference tournaments just to end. Let's get on with the real thing, the NCAA tournament. But we'll get that coming up in, 25 and a half hours?
It's 4 p.m.-ish?
Yeah.
Is it 3 to 4, the show?
4 o'clock.
It's at 4
Yeah,
to 5?
4 to 5. Hopefully the bracket is revealed in the first 10 minutes. I always hate when they drag it out. I remember that one year with the selection show. Do you remember this? I think BYU was in the bracket, and I think they were a bubble team. It was where they just showed the teams first. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And everyone was like, what? What did you just do? They showed all the teams first, and then they went into the bracket, and it was just like, well, BYU didn't get in. I can't remember how that was, but it was just the weirdest thing. Regardless, it's an exciting time of the year. While March Madness commands all the big headlines, in the backdrop coming up this week, Big 12 Pro Day, year 2. Big 12 players are going to be traveling down to Frisco, Texas to participate in drills and go through NFL-style combine workouts at Big 12 Pro Day. A lot of BYU guys going to be competing next week down in Texas.
It's an interesting format, and this is an important event for a couple people. I don't think it matters to Tyler Batty.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything there for him, but Caleb Etienne, important. Darius Lassiter, that sort of, song and dance with returning to BYU, I think that unceremoniously ended. I don't know if he's a draftable guy, but I think he could find his way onto a team. This would be a good moment for Darius. John Nelson, Connor Pay, 2 guys that I think this could benefit. And then, of course, Jacob Robinson. He's someone I think who could benefit from this day. I kind of hate this event, though. I think it would just be better served being run at BYU for these people. I think this is a downgrade for them. BYU put on a world-class pro day. So it's kind of a bummer in that regard because there's 200 guys at this event. Like you're just not getting the showcase.
Well, and you wonder too, how many reps will they get when you get to individual position workouts? I remember there were years, and you came to some pro days with me as well. gosh, it'd start at 9 a.m. and we'd be there till 2 o'clock. And I'm thinking, but still, you go, you know what?
Because everyone did every drill.
Yeah, and you just think, well, yeah, this is taking long for us, so what? But for the guy that's trying to get every chance they can to extend their football career, why not? That's awesome. Give it one last go. You don't know if you'll get that. And, I got to imagine they're just going to funnel them through. The positive side is that you're going to get more exposure, maybe some more GMs, maybe some high-level NFL personnel could show up. But, yeah, I'm with you. I kind of feel like the BYU Pro Day and just going back to campus for every one of these teams and showcasing your campus, your football facilities to these NFL scouts and executives would be a better experience for the players to have that and be kind of in comfortable confines of their indoor practice facilities. But regardless, the Big 12's taking this approach, and these guys are going to take advantage of their opportunity. I think another guy that's got to shine, and I don't know if he necessarily needs to shine in testing because he's an offensive lineman, but just someone like Connor Pay, show that he's healthy, they get a good 10-yard split time, and just be
Is he draftable, you think?
It's a good question. I feel like centers are either you could see him sometimes go in the first round if someone falls in love with that type of prospect, but typically it feels like a position where 5th, 6th, 7th, and Connor Pay, a little bit older on the as far as prospects go, but I feel like he could sneak into the 7th round maybe, but I would probably bank on more undrafted free agent would be my guess for Connor. But I think he could stick. I think he'd be a guy that could add a lot of value into a franchise if given an opportunity, but you got to stay healthy too. I heard a great story. I don't know if you caught it with Kalani Sitake's devotional. He really went into details about his experience as an undrafted free agent with the Cincinnati Bengals that I didn't even know, to the extent that his first practice, he got hurt going into practice. I always thought, I understood it as he got hurt in the practice, but his back was in pain before he arrived at the facility.
Oh, man.
And it's a great story. You can go listen on the Cougar Tracks podcast feed. It was his devotional at BYU. But, that's a big thing, too, is hopefully these guys are all healthy. Last year, Eddie Heckard at Big 12 Pro Day wasn't healthy, never got a shot. So I hope that these guys are all at their best version of themselves and they can put out their best foot forward and get a chance to stick on an NFL roster.
Looking at this list, it's kind of interesting to go through all the names. You can find this full list at KSLSports.com. You put out the full 200-player pro day. One guy, and look, I commend him for doing this because why not exhaust every opportunity? Not a BYU guy, though. Caleb Lohner.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
He just played in the Marriott Center.
Wild. And honestly, I was thinking of that I was talking with another reporter, and I was thinking, with what Lohner's role became with Utah basketball's rotation and how Utah basketball wasn't playing really for a postseason bid, was that the best move for him? Because he was a touchdown magnet for Utah in their few touchdowns they had. I mean, I'm not trying to be joking here. I know it's the BYU show, but that was a bad offense. And the few times they were getting in the end zone, Lohner was right there. I think he could be an interesting story. Remember that basketball player BYU had, Jordan Cameron? He became a stud for the Browns.
You're right.
Antonio Gates.
It's a good point. If he had just went full-blown prepare for an NFL opportunity, because he's got the physical tools.
Oh, yeah.
He's got great physical tools. He's got a – you didn't really see this year on the basketball floor for Utah because he just felt like a lumbering redwood. He didn't – but he's pretty athletic. He can get up. What was he playing? Like the undersized 5, just banging around with dudes in the post?
If he gets an opportunity in the NFL, how will that make all these other guys that have just been grinding since Christmas? This dude just rolls off the basketball court, shows up, kills it at Pro Day. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. Lohner's a freak athlete, man. Covering him when he was at BYU, I remember our conversations with Mark Pope about him. I mean, Lohner was always just kind of that, wow, like awe-inspiring type of athlete. I feel like Kaba Keita's an even greater athlete now that we're seeing in person at BYU, but Lohner's right there. I mean, he's a freak, and I'll be interested to see how he performs down in Texas.
Interesting to see also, some teams are hardly sending anyone to this event. Iowa State's sending 4 players.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising.
Yeah, so it is what it is. I just don't love. I don't love that there's not enough spotlight for some players. That's my only thing.
Just give everyone as much opportunity as you can, Big 12. You got to get the numbers up in this league for draft picks. So give them the necessary time. But I feel like the NFL as the scouts be like, okay, we got this time. Make it a hard out. Give them every opportunity. Gary Bohannon's going to go through the workouts too. Do you think there's any chance for Gary?
No.
Any chance to be an arm?
No.
In a camp?
No.
A free agent tryout?
No. You do?
Maybe a tryout. And there's different tiers. There's undrafted free agent contracts.
And then mini camp tryouts, right?
I think you could get a mini camp tryout.
I don't think so.
Maybe the Chiefs call him up. Andy Reid does him a solid.
Maybe.
Because there's been a few guys from BYU that have got that, where they go to the Chiefs and just get a tryout, and sometimes you wonder if Reed's doing them a solid, like helping out Kalani's guys. And I don't know. I'd like to think there's more substance to that than just simply trying to help out someone. But
if you look at that list of BYU names, Batty, I think, is a draftable guy, right?
Yep.
He's probably the only surefire draft pick.
Yeah.
And even then, he's what, late round? 5
I'd
to
say
7?
5th, 6th. ETN, I feel like he should be a draft pick, but to me, missing the combine says something. Like not being invited to that. And I know that there was this in-between where he might be coming back to BYU, but it was clear before the combine, before the invites were dished out, that he was then going on. And if the combine really wanted him, they could have probably added him. So I feel like that kind of says something when you're not at the combine. It feels like it's a steeper hill to climb to get drafted. But Etienne's a freak too. I mean, that body and that film he put together on last season, that's got to intrigue some team out there. But I think he's one of those guys that, okay, 7th round ends, phone lines are blowing up, and he's got a deal immediately after the draft is over.
Who are the other undrafted? Connor Pay.
Yep.
Is Jacob Robinson safely an undrafted guy, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that he'll get knocked because of his height, but he'll make it in the league. I think Blake Mangelson's the wild card. That I think 5 years from now, he could be the guy that's still doing it in the league and
like
playing.
A Brett Kiesel type?
Exactly. And I think Blake Mangelson, because he could play D-end, he could play D-tackle. He's got film from both sides. He's been pretty good at both. And Mangelson's a good athlete. And that's where you always kind of turn to in this world of NFL draft. It's not always production. John Nelson, probably a more productive player in the interior for BYU than Mangelson. But Mangelson's got that, athleticism and that scouts will like, and maybe a little bit higher ceiling potentially. That's what it always comes down to with these drafts. It's always potential. And who's got, more left to their development and game. And so I think Mangelson's an intriguing guy as well that I think I wouldn't be surprised, maybe if he's first off, like a right away undrafted free agent, immediately gets a deal right when the draft's over.
Dang, Blake Mangelson. Hope a lot of these guys get opportunities. It feels like there has been a big uptick under Kalani in guys getting at least an opportunity to make a team.
And I will say, I think in the coming years, 2026 and beyond, I think the numbers are going to go up. I think, next year you could see a lot more NFL guys for BYU. It'll be interesting to see if a year from now Jake Retzloff's viewed as an NFL guy. Right now, probably not at all, but he's got that chance to grow into that. That's going to be a lot of fun to see if he can become an NFL prospect next season. Last year, or 5 years ago, at this time, no one thought Zach Wilson was an NFL quarterback, probably, and then he becomes the number 2 pick in a COVID cycle. So crazier things can happen, and that's one thing that's different than the NBA. It feels like the NBA draft, there's never just some out of left field guy that emerges. Maybe a Dalton Knecht who ended up with the Lakers. That was kind of unexpected at Tennessee last year, but those are few and far between. It feels like sometimes these NBA draft classes are predetermined for years. Whereas the NFL, it's kind of fluid. Like if someone's hot for their junior year or senior year, they'll climb the draft board. So maybe in 2026 draft and beyond, BYU can get some more picks.
Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll wrap up with hoops and some final thoughts on the big day tomorrow for hopefully multiple teams in the state selection Sunday. Oh, boy. Been a good show so far. Loved having Dave Rose on earlier today. He had some great reaction to the Big 12 tournament. Highly recommend checking that out on the Cougar Sports Saturday podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm sure it's there. And then if you wouldn't mind, while you're there, subscribe to the show on the podcast. Leave a comment, rate and review. We're always open to making this the best show for you, Cougar Nation. So any feedback would be greatly appreciated.
We've got an updated bracket from Lenardi just less than an hour ago.
Uh-oh.
He's got BYU as a 5 seed, playing a 12 seed, Xavier or Boise State.
In?
Well, that's what's interesting. It's not a pod or place that BYU could play. He's got them in Seattle, which is not, it's a Friday, Sunday. But he's got them in the West region as a 5 seed playing either the Musketeers or Broncos. We were talking about this in the commercial break earlier today. Hopefully BYU doesn't get a to-be-determined opponent. It's kind of a disadvantage.
It really is.
Because then the team you're going to face has already got a little bit of momentum in the NCAA tournament, and you're preparing for 2 teams instead of 1. Hopefully you get just this is your team that you're going to face, and then Kevin Young and his staff can put together a game plan to prepare for that opponent. I just think that's kind of a little bit of a disadvantage. I know you're still the higher seeded team and whatnot. Not looking to make excuses here, but hopefully for BYU, they can just get a set opponent.
On Bracketeer.org, our friend Rocco Miller, he has him as a 6 against Drake in Wichita.
See, that's interesting, too, because Drake would be the closer team. Aren't they from Iowa? Drake, I believe, is located in Iowa. That would be maybe I'm wrong on that, but
nope, they're in Des Moines, Iowa.
I don't know how far Des Moines is from Wichita, but that feels like that's a doable drive where BYU fans aren't going to be driving to Wichita. I'm okay with that. I'd rather have a set opponent than a first 4 deal.
Yeah.
I'll take I know Drake's red hot and they've won 30 games this year, but everyone that you face in this bracket's going to be good.
The thing I like about being a 6 is that then you have a 3 and then potentially a 2. I like that a lot more than the 1 seed lines are very hard this year. Auburn is legit. Florida's good. If Cooper Flagg miraculously recovers, I think Duke is really good. I'm not convinced he'll be himself the rest of the NCAA tournament after that injury that he sustained in the ACC conference championship tournament. But the thing I don't like about the 5 is that then you run up against a 1 pretty quickly. I'd like to avoid a 1. So maybe in some respects you want to be a 6.
And we know what BYU looks like against one of those 1s twice, and it wasn't pretty. Not to say it couldn't be different, and I won't bet against Kevin Young, but we already have a little bit of data that says BYU against 1 seeds struggle, and teams that are in that 2 to 3 territory, a lot more competitive. So I think that is a good point.
What about the rest of the Big 12? Where does Lenardi have?
He's got 8 teams from the Big 12, which I think is where they should be. They should not be getting only 7. I think teams like West Virginia should get in, and he's got them in as a 10 seed facing Missouri. He's got Houston as a 1 seed in his bracket. Looking at other spots, Texas Tech, he's got as a 3 facing who he projects to win the WAC, Utah Valley. He's got them taking down Grand Canyon. So Texas Tech and Utah Valley in a 3-14 would be really interesting. And
Iowa State, a 4 seed, fell down a little bit, which is, I feel like, a little disappointing that he's got an arrow trending down for Iowa State because they lost at the buzzer, basically, to BYU.
To a top 25 team twice, once in double overtime and then once on a neutral floor in a 4-point game.
Come on, give me a break.
I know that they're banged up. Maybe he's factoring in that, but Lipsy should be back. I don't know about Gilbert. Kansas, he's got as a 7 seed playing Utah State.
Interesting.
That would be...
That'd be an interesting game.
I would pick the Jayhawks, but that's a matchup I think Utah State could win.
Arizona, a 4 seed.
I feel like they should be higher, especially if they beat Houston today. But as we've heard in the past, that these brackets don't necessarily always factor in the championship games in conference tournament.
5, though, would be, I feel like, a big win for BYU, don't you? I feel like that would be fair. It would feel like that a 5 is what they deserve, in my opinion. That puts them, if you're just thinking about rankings, that puts them at what? That would put them in the 20 to 25 range.
Yeah. And that would be the highest seed they've received since Jimmer's senior year.
Wow.
When they were a 3 seed. That would be the highest. Last year they were a 6 seed.
They were a 6 when UCLA got them,
yes,
too, right?
In the COVID year in Indianapolis, they were also a 6. So that would be the highest seed BYU's received in 14 years.
Wow. Well, it's going to be a lot of fun.
That it is. And we will have Cougar Nation coming up on Monday night, 6 to 7. Possibly right after BYU football practice. We're finding out the details on that, so we will keep you posted. But we will be live taking your phone calls on Monday night to preview BYU's NCAA tournament matchup, and we will have coverage on the ground wherever BYU goes. I'll be there getting you covered with all things BYU basketball next week in the NCAA tournament.
Looking forward to that coverage, Mitch. For BYU fans who listen every single week, we thank you and we appreciate your listenership. We will talk to you Monday night.